Happy Father's Day. To celebrate the day, I have a reading for you from Face the Change. This is a section where Jessica and Walter are exploring whether their relationship might be something a little more important, a little more longer lasting. And it's complicated, of course, because Jessica is a single mom. It's always interesting when you've got children in the mix. So this is a chapter not too far into the book called Jessica and Walter Sittin' in a Tree. Jessica felt butterflies in her stomach. Kissing Walter always did that to her, made her giddy and wobbly in the best possible way. "Come back down here, Fly Girl. I wasn't done kissing you yet." Jessica opened her eyes and realized she was hovering about 6 inches above the kitchen floor and rising. It had not only been the kisses giving her butterflies. She smiled and turned her head to burp more or less discreetly into her elbow, then lowered herself slowly to the floor, landing with her feet between her boyfriend's loafers. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Sorry, I guess you swept me off my feet again." Standing on her tiptoes, she kissed him again, this time maintaining her contact with the ground. As the kiss deepened, she pushed her body against his, and he let his hands slide across her back and down the curve of her hip. They'd had a great family weekend, with lots of time with the boys, but not enough time alone together. "Mom!" Jessica leaped across the room in a single fluid bound to the refrigerator, where she opened the door and pretended to look for something, pressing a hand against her heart. Her pulse raced, and not just from her flight across the room. Walter laughed and leaned against the counter. She gave him a half-reproachful look. She was grateful Max still had the habit of yelling for her from 3 rooms away before he came looking. Sure enough, the next sound was his shoes slapping the floor as he ran through the living room and dining room at full speed. Jessica closed the refrigerator when she heard him arrive and turned around to greet her 4-year-old son as he slid around the corner. She was surprised to see Frankie there too, standing in the doorway staring. How long had her older son been standing there? "Mom, can I ride my bike with Annie and her mama? They're going to the playground and back, please." Jessica looked at the clock and nodded. "That's fine, Max. You still have an hour before dinner. Tell Annie's mom to call me if she needs me." As he careened around the corner, she called after him, "Don't forget your helmet." Walter just started to pick up his things. He frowned at the calendar reminders on his cell phone before slipping the phone into his pocket. Jessica knew he'd have to pay for taking the entire weekend off with her and the boys. Work didn't stop at the department, and Walter had lots of analyses to review after all the evidence and research they brought back from Indiana, not to mention all the other cases in progress. "I'm going to have to go. I need time to read through the lab reports before work tomorrow." He walked over to Frankie, who still stood in the doorway, and held out a hand to the boy for a handshake. "See you tomorrow night? I think we're doing pizza after Taekwondo." Frankie didn't take Walter's hand as he normally would. Instead, he stepped in close and peered up at the man, searching his face for something. Walter knelt so they could see each other eye to eye. Frankie blurted out the question that must have already been on his mind. "Are you going to marry my mom?" Jessica felt her face burn bright red as she sputtered something incoherent. That answered how long he'd been standing there. Long enough to see the kiss. She shouldn't have been so physical with Walter, not when her children could have walked in at any moment. They weren't ready for that yet, and she felt guilty for letting her selfish needs get in the way of what was best for her boys. It was difficult, navigating single parenting waters at the same time as swimming the high seas of romance, building a relationship while caring for her family, and building a new career on top of it all. They'd only been dating a few months, and it was still less than a year since her divorce. She hoped this would be a forever thing, but they hadn't talked that far ahead yet. She'd probably put Walter in a very awkward position and maybe hurt his budding relationship with her prickly older son, all because she couldn't wait for a more appropriate moment to kiss him. Walter didn't say anything for a long moment, and Jessica's ears burned in the silence. What was he going to say? He didn't look back at Jessica, but her skin tingled as if he had. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft and gentle. "I was thinking about it. Do you think that might be a good idea?" Jessica's heart lurched in her chest again. He was thinking about it? Frankie crossed his arms over his skinny chest and looked at his mom, then back at Walter. He scowled disapprovingly. "I think people are supposed to be married if they're going to kiss and stuff like that." Jessica wanted to grab her son and hug him, but she didn't want to ruin the moment or embarrass him. Walter knew her son was a thoughtful child. Frankie took his role as the man of the house very seriously after his parents' divorce. It didn't matter that he was 7. He believed it was his job to protect his mother and his little brother. She held her breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Now Walter and Frankie were both looking at her, Walter still crouching on one knee. Walter held out a hand toward Jessica so she could grasp his fingers, but turned his gaze back to the boy. Your mom and I haven't talked about whether we're going to get married yet, Frankie, but I do love her very much. Jessica smiled then, so widely she thought her eyes must be lost in her cheeks. She knelt beside the two on the floor and pressed her forehead against her son's and then against her boyfriend's. And I love both of you. And I love everyone too, came a voice from the doorway. Frankie yelled, Grandma, and hurried to wrap his arms around his grandmother's waist. Ava Rourke held the plastic bag from the local dairy out of reach and tousled her grandson's hair. No one answered when I knocked, so I let myself in. She arched a well-groomed eyebrow at her daughter, and Jessica knew there would be questions later about the little scene she'd just walked in on. Jessica grinned at her. Oh yes, they definitely needed to talk tonight. Thanks.